Toronto Stevie Live. Mark Carney cuts a deal with China that's good for Canadian canola farmers but problematic for the Canadian automobile industry. Like and subscribe, leave some comments, and let me know what you think about these comments. You know, Mark Carney is in China. He cuts a deal, and what he basically succeeded in doing was he got China to lower their tariffs on Canadian canola from 75% down to 15% on canola seed, eliminate tariffs on canola meal, and in exchange for that, he has agreed to allow 49,000 Chinese-made vehicles to be brought into the country with a possibility that sometime in the future there could be Canadian Chinese companies investing in Canada to actually build automobiles in Canada. Now, the reaction to this inside Canada, I feel, has been, especially, I guess it depends on your political ideology. You have to understand, I think that, Mark Carney is the Prime Minister of all of Canada, and so he has to represent everyone's interests. Canadian canola farmers have taken quite the hit for 3 years, or almost 3 years, since Justin Trudeau's government imposed these heavy tariffs on Chinese-made vehicles, and China responded with the heavy tariffs on Canadian canola oil. So Mark Carney, the globetrotting trade, globetrotting negotiator, had come in and basically clean up the messes that Trudeau created, and he has done a major deal. And this is good news being celebrated in Western Canada by the Canadian canola farmers who, have been losing millions of dollars because of these tariffs, and are looking forward to selling, Canadian canola. And also, I believe it also affects the lobsters. China is a big customer of Canadian lobsters, and they'll be exporting lots of lobsters to China as well. But this is a major, I think, a major win for Canada to once again, in the long-term strategy for Mark Carney, to diversify our trade so that we are less dependent on the United States. This is in reaction, today, as I'm recording this is Friday, January. I had to look at the date. Friday, January 16th, 2026. I called into the Alex Pearson show on AM 640 at lunchtime today while I was eating lunch, and I made some comments. This is part of a long-term strategy by Mark Carney to lessen our dependence on the United States. And the host, Alex Pearson, just kept going on and on about how we're going to be under China's thumb. They're so worried about China being a national security threat that are you willing to throw away $118 billion, according to the Government of Canada's own website, $118 billion of trade between Canada and China, the majority of which comes from China, by the way. Are you willing to throw that away? I don't think so. And I don't think the Prime Minister of the country, regardless of the political party that he belongs to, the Prime Minister of Canada cannot afford to throw $118 billion of trade away. So any prime minister of any party was going to make a deal with China. And it just happened to be Mark Carney. But because it's Mark Carney, because he's a liberal, he's been facing all kinds of criticism. Um, and I think it's unjustified. It is completely unjustified. Mark Carney should be celebrated, for making this deal. It's being called a historic deal. Um, and I noticed also today that Premier Doug Ford, he was complaining, and the UAW has been complaining about, or CAW, or was complaining about the cars coming in, the 49,000 cars. Now, my understanding, and I think this was on the Global News story, is that the total amount of cars coming in from China amounts to less than 3% of the total number of cars that are sold in Canada, which basically means like 97%, more than 97% of cars sold in Canada don't come from China. So for people to be alarmist and complain that this is going to affect the Canadian car industry, keep in mind one other thing, that Donald Trump, has been strong arming the American car companies into basically closing up shop in Canada and moving to the United States, which, by the way, will drive up the cost of an automobile sold if he does this, if the car companies do this. And so the Canadian automobile industry is already suffering from major blows from Donald Trump, not from Mark Carney, but from Donald Trump. So Mark Carney, in response, has to do something for the Canadian automobile industry. If that means encouraging investment into Canada from China that will benefit Canadian automobile workers, then I think that is also a good thing. Now, one thing that Alex Pearson did say to me when I was on was the national security threat that Carney, when he was running for prime minister, said Canada was a national security threat. And my response to that was, Mark Carney's eyes are wide open. I am absolutely certain he is well aware that China can be a bad actor, that China plays by its own rules. And by the way, that includes completely ignoring the rules of the countries that they operate in, like Canada. But I think Carney's eyes are wide open, and he knows exactly who he's dealing with. Um, so I think this is a major step forward for Canada, because Canada is always going to have to negotiate deals with good countries, with bad countries, with like presidents and prime ministers of countries that can sometimes be bad actors. I would even call Donald Trump a bad actor, a wannabe fascist, isolationist, wannabe dictator. Um, and keep in mind also that people they're freaking out over, oh, we're making a deal with China. We need to foster our relationship with the United States. Well, keep in mind that Donald Trump has a geographic advantage over China in trying to shake down our country into doing what he wants. Thankfully, I think, and another positive to Mark Carney, thankfully, Mark Carney and his negotiators, if they're confronted with a bad deal that may be bad for the Canadian economy, Canadian employers, Canadian workers, that they can say no every single time. And that's what they should be doing. They should not be saying yes to a deal that is bad for our country. I expect them to keep saying no, and I certainly hope that they do. So I think, we've got to we've got to uh, keep positive on this and realize that we need to look out for Canada. We need to look out for all industries, and this was a positive step today for Canadian farmers who have been suffering. And so um, I think that uh, I want to give Carney a big thumbs up for making the deal. Like and subscribe to Toronto Stevie Live Political Desk. Leave some comments. Let me know what you think. And we'll see you again later.